But when the grain they had brought from Egypt ran out, and the famine was still severe in the land, the old patriarch realized he had no choice. He would have to send them back to Egypt for more grain, and he would have to send Benjamin with them. When the brothers arrived in Egypt and once again stood before the mighty Joseph, their reception was entirely different. Joseph was delighted to see Benjamin with them, and he ordered his steward to take them to his house and slaughter an animal, and he would dine with them at noon. The steward took the men to Joseph's great house, and he brought Simeon out of prison to be reunited with them. Joseph joined them at noon and asked them about their father, and paid particular attention to his younger brother Benjamin. They still did not recognize Joseph as their long-lost brother. According to the Bible, they drank and were merry with him, a far cry from the harsh and hostile treatment they had experienced before. Then Joseph commanded his steward to fill their bags with food, as much as they can carry. He also took his own silver cup and told the steward to secretly place it on top of the grain in Benjamin's sack. By morning's light, the brothers were on their way home. They had traveled only a short distance when they were overtaken by Joseph's steward, who accused them of stealing Joseph's silver cup. He challenged the brothers. "Why have you returned evil for good?" Naturally, the brothers were amazed and vehemently denied it. "Why should we do such a thing?" they said. "If it be found with any of us, let him die. Moreover, the rest of us will become your slaves." "So be it," said the steward. "He who has it shall be my slave. The rest of you shall go free." The steward began searching each man's sack, starting with the oldest. The last sack the steward searched was Benjamin's. And there, of course, he found the silver cup. Seeing this, the brothers cried out and tore their clothes in despair. How could they ever explain this to their father, Jacob? They loaded up their donkeys and returned to the city. They stood in fear before the now stern Joseph, who said, "What deed is this that you have done?" Judah stepped forward and pleaded eloquently with Joseph, telling him about his father and his love for Benjamin, the only remaining child of his old age. He ended his plea by asking Joseph to let him stay as his slave and let Benjamin go back to his father. Judah's plea was too much for Joseph. He could not keep up his charade any longer. He cried out and sent all the Egyptians out of the room, and he wept so loudly that all the Egyptians could hear him, and also the household of Pharaoh. The brothers were dismayed at this. But Joseph said, with great compassion and understanding, in Genesis 45:4,
I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are 5 more years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God.
When Pharaoh heard that Joseph had been reunited with his brothers, he was very pleased. He said to Joseph, "Tell your brothers to load up their donkeys and go back to the land of Canaan, and get your father and all his household and come to me, and I will give them the best land in Egypt, and they will live off the fat of the land." When they returned home, and Jacob heard the whole story, that his son Joseph was alive and the governor of all Egypt, he was stunned, and at first he didn't believe them. But when he saw all the wagons Joseph had sent to carry them back, he rejoiced and said, "Enough! My son Joseph is still alive. I will go to see him before I die." So Jacob set out for Egypt with 70 members of his household and all their belongings and livestock. They stopped in Beersheba to offer a sacrifice to God, and that night God made Jacob a promise that has become central to the history of the Hebrews. In Genesis 46:2, God says,
Jacob, Jacob, I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you a great nation there. I myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also bring you up again.
When Jacob and his large family arrived in Egypt, Joseph presented him to Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh, and Pharaoh was as good as his word. He instructed Joseph to settle his father and his brothers in the region of Goshen, which is a fertile area in the northeastern part of the Nile Delta, and see that they had food and anything else they needed. Jacob and his people prospered there, and they were fruitful and multiplied, and Jacob lived in Egypt for 17 years. During that time, Joseph became even more wealthy and powerful. By trading grain for land and services, he effectively abolished private property and established a kind of feudal system that was very profitable for the pharaohs and for Joseph himself. Then one day he received the sad news that Jacob was dying.
הנה אביך חולה.
He took his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, and went to his father's bedside. Then Jacob blessed Joseph and his two boys. Jacob then called all his other sons around him, and he blessed them also.
את רבקה אשתו, ושמה קברתי את לאה.
And then, surrounded by the men after whom the 12 tribes of Israel were named, the patriarch Jacob breathed his last. He was 147 years old. Joseph and Benjamin and all their brothers took their father's body back to the land of Canaan, and they buried him in the cave at Mamre. There at Mamre, Jacob, his father Isaac, and his grandfather Abraham would remain together for eternity. Joseph returned to Egypt, where he had a large family of grandchildren and great-grandchildren. He lived to be 110 years old, and when he died, he was embalmed and placed in a coffin in Egypt.